I want to bring in Stephan Haggard. He's the director of the Korea Pacific program at the University of California, San Diego. Stephan, welcome.
Thank you, Asieh. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I want to ask you about this delay. Russia says it wants time to look over the wording of this new resolution at the United Nations. I want to get your reaction. What do you make of that?
I don't think it's really a big deal. Russia is probably just making a procedural claim that they want to be a party to this. In the end, Russia doesn't actually trade that much with the DPRK. So they could be a spoiler, but I doubt very seriously whether they would change fundamental features of the resolution at this stage.
What about the fact that China is very much supporting these sanctions, tough new sanctions, the toughest in some 20 years? How significant is that?
Well, I'm surprised, frankly. I'll be honest with you. I've watched this game for a number of years, and I never expected they would cross this important Rubicon of going after the commercial trade. There are many pieces of this sanctions resolution. It's 20 pages long plus, but there's one provision in particular that I think is more significant than any other, and that's the sectoral ban on exports of energy and raw materials. Coal alone accounts for about 40% of North Korea's exports. And this is basically a key source of foreign exchange for the country. I just don't see them being able to survive this sanction measure. And in fact, I don't expect that these sanctions are even going to have to be implemented for long, because what's going to happen is that North Korea will probably sometime within the next weeks or maybe months be forced to come back to the negotiating table.
And isn't that the ultimate goal, Stephan, to get them to come back to the negotiating table for the six-party talks?
Absolutely. I think most analysts, including in the United States, it's certainly been the Chinese position, view the purpose of sanctions to get back to the talks. Now, there are issues of what the nature of these talks are going to be. The United States, Japan, and South Korea have insisted that these talks focus first and foremost on the issue of denuclearization. The Chinese proposal is a little different. It's talked about moving towards a peace regime discussion at the same time or in parallel. So there's still politics here about how these negotiations will actually unfold, but I think the objective has to be to get back to the talks, no question.
So, Stephan, what's going to happen if these sanctions are adopted, they're passed, no change of behavior from Pyongyang, and on top of that, they will refuse to come to the negotiating table? Then where does the international community go?
Well, the thing you have to understand about sanctions is that they have material effect. This isn't just a diplomatic announcement. Once the markets in North Korea, which have been growing over the last 10 years, recognize that this kind of constriction on access to foreign exchange is going to be coming down the pike, then what you're going to see is a reaction to that in commodity markets, particularly with respect to rice, and most importantly, with respect to the exchange rate. If anyone wants to follow the effect of just announcing these sanctions, I think all you have to do is look at the exchange rate. Over the next couple weeks and months, you're going to see the won, the North Korean won, fall through the floor, the same kind of thing that happened in Iran. And even though that's happening in the private markets, this has tremendous effect on welfare of individuals, the capacity to import. All business conducted will basically grind to a halt if the exchange rate falls far and fast enough.
Stephan, I want to ask you a question about the missile defense system that U.S. and the Republic of Korea have been talking about. China has voiced strong opposition to the THAAD deployment. China's ambassador to Seoul says if it happens, it would break the strategic balance in the region, create a vicious cycle of Cold War confrontations. Your take?
Well, I think all sides have been making kind of strong statements. China made this very strong statement with respect to its diplomatic relations with South Korea that I thought was a little over the top. The United States has denied there's any connection between THAAD and the sanctions resolution. But I think, in fact, if we can get back to the six-party talks, the deployment of THAAD becomes less necessary for the United States at this particular juncture. And you can even see a series of other moves that might relax tensions, for example, in the next cycle with respect to exercises. So I'm not optimistic, but I think that we are headed back to talks within the next several months.
And talks are always a good first step. Stephan Haggard, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.